as Americans, that phrase seems like an oxymoron because many times people are thinking of September 11th as not a happy thing. But that was one occurrence, 1 year. The time in the calendar of September 11th has happened for eons. So why would we take one occurrence and judge every time of our planet's rotation as being now forever a bad thing or a sad thing? Haven't there been other days when something sad or bad happened and we don't even know about them or remember them? It's a relative thing. And one of the things that we remember about God is that God is not relative. God is always God. If there were no humans on the planet, if every human decided that their big toe was God, it would make no difference. God would still be God. Now this is important. Why? Well, today we're talking about prayer. And you've heard people say that prayer changes things, and we've experienced that. I know I have. But also when you think about prayer in this context, in the way that we talk about prayer in our larger society, it's usually supplication. It's usually begging for something, or observing something, such as in the prayers that people offer on September 11th. But God is God, and God is eternal. So how does prayer change things? Well, some people have written certain words and decided that they're a magic formula. And by saying them exactly the right way, with your body in the right position, in the right building, it's going to make a difference. Some people feel that if they go into a church and get on their knees and put their hands like this, it means more than walking down the street and mentally communing with God. I say no. Some people think that a prayer has to begin with, "Dear God," like God doesn't know you're talking to him. The God I know knows everything. So even when we take his name in vain and say, "Oh God," says, "Yes, I'm here." Because God is listening to everything. God is everywhere present. Now, one of the curious things about prayer, when we say it in this society at least, have you ever noticed that when someone says, "I'll pray for you," they're implying or believing that something is amiss that needs their input? Now, don't get me wrong. Your energy makes a difference. So it matters when you pray. But nothing is wrong. Prayer helps us get in alignment with divine order. Divine order is. God is divine order. It's not a temporary thing. It's not something that we have to put money in an offering plate or buy a course or a book to have access to. Divine order is. Now we have free will. So we don't have to be orderly. We can be as disorderly as we want to be. You know how you get those intuitions that you should do a certain thing or go a certain way, and you say, "I don't want to do that." It can be a little thing. It can be a big thing. But you always have free will. Now, to me, it's not free because you will pay a price for not following that inner guidance, not following what your soul is trying to communicate to you. And sometimes that's discomfort as the price. Sometimes it's delay as a price. Sometimes it's pleasurable. You might enjoy the choice of your free will, but it may not be the best for your soul. It might be a detour from some other greater good that you might have experienced. Now, get me clear. I'm not saying free will is a bad thing. A lot of people think of free will as being the fall. But as we were saying in Sunday school, God made everything and called it good and very good, right? That includes the humans with free will. So how can free will be bad? That was part of creation. God knew what it was doing when He put that in there, right? So free will is not an enemy. It is not a bad thing. We are not saying that we have to live according to a narrow definition. It's just saying that when you make a choice, it changes things. And prayer is a choice of aligning yourself with all that is God. Now we talk about God being all, and that includes all possibilities. Are we really open to all possibilities? When I pray for greater understanding, am I willing to give up my pet peeves and my cherished notions? I need to be if I'm truly asking for the highest. Because if I'm asking for things at the level of my personality, that's incomplete. My personality doesn't know everything by a long shot. It knows only this much out of vastness. We don't live long enough on many planets and many situations and many different ways of being to know everything at the level of personality. We only know a tiny bit. So when we pray, we are trying to get ourselves aligned with that Holy Spirit, with all that God is. Now, the most common form of prayer is supplication, of course. God, please make such and such happen. Please make such and such not happen. This is the level at which we all start. Even the one that we learn as kids. Now I lay me down to sleep, which is really kind of deep if you think about this little kid thinking about dying in its sleep. I don't know if you had that experience of waking up to what you were really saying and wondering, what? But it's supplication, it's asking for something, and that's normal at the kid level because that's what we do with our parents. Our parents are our fleshly gods. They determine our food, our waking, our sleeping, our school, everything we do. So it's a good way as a child to understand God. It's a real concrete, visceral way of seeing our place in relation to. But as we grow up, we think of prayers in slightly different ways. Sometimes we say, I pray that so-and-so happens, but we don't necessarily are asking God. Sometimes we're just saying, we want that to happen. Somewhere we sometimes think of things happening in the world as not necessarily being heavenly or ordained or divine. Again, I say not. I say God is everywhere. God is everything. So therefore, everything is part of that perfection. Now, if I'm going to drive to New Mexico, there are probably 50 different ways to drive there. I've never done it. She has. Ask her. But there's probably different. I can go the opposite direction and still get back to New Mexico. There are all ways to get there. Some short, some nice, some not so nice, some fast, whatever. And if I'm on one road, I can choose and change and take another road. It's pretty much like our lives. We all come from the one source. We all return to the one source. Free will lets us choose how we're going to do that. Easy, hard, scenic route, ugly route, fast, slow. We can even get off at an exit before we get to our destination if we want to. Some people do. That's part of our free will. And God called that good and very good. So it's wonderful to be an individualization, a unique individualization. You are not doing anything wrong by being you. In fact, you are honoring the way God put you here to be who and what you are. But just as there's a GPS in our cars, most cars, and just as there are maps that we can follow and choose our route, prayer helps us stay in touch with that. Now, if you use your GPS and you make a turn that's not on what whoever it is telling you to do, the car doesn't turn off. The car doesn't force itself on, unless you got one of those self-driving cars. That's another technology. We're not talking about that here. But the car doesn't force you to go the way the GPS wants to go. You can do whatever you want. You can back up if you want to. But it will gently say, turn back here and then get you back on the route that it wants you to be on. Just as prayer is helping us to find our direction within divine order, so too, if you have to go around the block to get back on the route, you're back on the route. If you have to go all the way around the town to get back on the route. If you turn the car off and start again the next day, you get back on the route. The same thing with prayer. It's an interdirectional system. It's part of us aligning with that divine order. Now, it's really interesting. I would recommend, if you have a chance, to read the Wikipedia article on prayer. It's very interesting that many cultures, way beyond just our Christian culture, use the folded hands. In Islam, they are told to pray and only pray. You know how you'll hear something that says, turn off your cell phones, stop playing with the computer, and pay attention? Mm-hmm. That's what they use, that concept in Islam. And for them, the different body positions are part of that. You can't be thinking of someone else at a certain time, you have to do this and turn that way and all that. And the same thing, you can't be manipulating things if your hands are still. Even in the Buddhist, I think it is, this is namaste, recognizing the divinity in you. And you can't be doing a whole lot of other stuff, eating and making the bed and stuff when your hands are here. Now, these were symbolic ways of focusing. And the same thing with the prayers that are written out, like the Book of Common Prayer. You know, in our society some people use that. Certain other people have other prayers written down. And even the Lord's Prayer, they said, teach us to pray. And he said, in this manner. He didn't say repeat this word after word. He said, pray in this manner, in this way. So it's not a formula that these words are like a magical blessing or a magical formula to get things to happen. It's a way of getting our consciousness in tune with all that is. Now, in the New Thought movement, we use affirmative prayer. We realize with the physicists that time and space are really illusory. And we know that if we are asking for something, it already is. Just because we haven't seen it doesn't make it not reality. Just as if that child asked for a piece of cake or a cookie. Their asking didn't make the cookie come into being. The cookie was already there. They were expressing their openness, their desire for that good. So with affirmative prayer, some people say 7 steps, some say 5, some say 3. 3 is the easiest one to remember. First of all, identification. What power are we identifying with? We are identifying with all that is. We are touching the eternal part of the universe we inhabit. We are realizing that that connection is and always will be. And that's important, because if we don't feel connected to our source, how can we receive? If we don't understand that this vastness that we are attempting to communicate with is already in touch with us, how can we get any kind of understanding, realization, manifestation, whatever word you want to use? How can that happen in our lives if there's no connection? By identifying with God and all that God there is, we tune ourselves, just as a piano is tuned or any other instrument. We get ourselves aligned with our source. Because as humans, the vastness of God is sometimes seems a little out of reach, seems a little remote. And when we truly align with all that is, we can realize that we are always not only in touch with all that is, but part of. That this is what's expressing through us. That's what we mean when we say we are alive with the life of God. That there's one life. There's not your life and your life and your life. This is all God life. And we partake in it in our own unique and special way. And the more we open to that possibility, the more we can embody. This is a very important step. And I think that when you think about prayers of supplication, that is one thing that you don't usually see. It's usually a God over there and the supplicant over here. Getting that connection with God, to me, is one of, not the, but one of the most important steps. Now, the middle, the meat in the sandwich, the human part that wants to say, take this cup from me. It says, give me this cup. When we as humans make a request, there is part of us that already knows the answer. By definition. Remember, you're a spiritual being having a human experience. You're not just this body, just this consciousness, just this awareness of what's around you. You're so much more. And we have been given the gift of a veil separating us from that vastness so that we can operate on this planet, so that we can open to these human experiences. But that doesn't mean we're cut off from that greater part of us. Your soul, which is always in contact with God, always active in God, is active in your life all the time. Sometimes we think of it as inklings or intuitions or serendipity, whatever you want to call it, whether you put it in a church term or a metaphysical term or physics, however you want to use it. There is part of you, a larger part of you, that is an eternal being and aware of it. Many times we think about it, but we don't have that visceral feeling of the fact that we are eternal beings now. This is not something we will attain after we die. We are that now. That's why that identification is so important. So if you've identified with the source of all, isn't it going to change your way of asking? Isn't that going to change what you desire? If you know that you have not made a mistake, you can't make a mistake, that you are informed by all that is in everything you do in your life, what else can you ask for? But more, please. If you realize that divine order is, what can you seek but more awareness of that? When you see that everything that's happening in your life is leading you to your highest good, what else is there to say but thank you? Which is your third step, gratitude. We've had in our bulletins, and I know you've all heard it before, that if you said thank you, and that was the only prayer you ever offered, that would be enough. And that's really true in the sense that by saying that, you're realizing the perfection of all that is. Do we really think that God made a mistake somewhere here? Anybody want to correct God? I don't. I have not a fingernail's worth of an increase of knowledge over God. So I'm happy to let go and let God. Now, does that mean that prayer is useless, just an exercise? No. Remember, you are a radiating center. You are an energetic being. And just as you putting your attention on something affects that, your prayer, your heartfelt prayer, your inner spiritual self directed in a certain way makes a difference. This is why so many religions, not just Christians, have prayer groups. And we pray in many religions not only for the living but for the dead, because they're still energetic beings, just because they're not walking around in a body. Even in our daily word, it talked about praying for the living and those who've passed on. Do you do that? A lot of people say something on the day they died, or like September 11th, or say something on their birthday, but if you loved them every day when they were here, don't you still love them every day when they're gone? And didn't what they do last? Isn't that part of your consciousness and everyone that they met? So we celebrate that through prayer and be grateful that they existed, the qualities that they expressed, the joy that they brought. Let that remain part of your life, because it is, whether you acknowledge it or not. So why not feed that? Feed the good that they were in your experience. Now, we don't take it so far that you have rituals you have to do. That's one of the great things I like about unity. You can make your own rituals. You do what's significant and meaningful to you. I happen to like long bubble baths with candles and incense, and I do my work in the water. That works for me. If you like doing that on a roller coaster, that's fine. The point is, if you think about it, everything you are doing is a prayer. You know that thing about praying without ceasing? You're doing it whether you realize it or not. The point is, by realizing it, you bring that much more power into focus. It's like a magnifying glass that hasn't quite been tweaked to get that clear view. And when you focus, all of that clarity comes, all of that attention augments what is seen. If you think of your whole life as a prayer, just for one day, try it for a day, and you'll be really amazed. A lot of times, it functions like a muscle, in that if you pray all the time, you'll begin to see the response to your prayer all the time. So if your prayer is, God damn it, you'll see the response to that. And you really don't want to damn anything, do you? You don't want that in your life. You want God bless it, and I mean in the good way. You want things to be harmonious and pleasant for everyone, because we're all connected. So there's nobody you want to put down or put outside of your heart. So if you are praying for, let's say, harmony in your relationships, that's everything. That's everyone, because we're all connected. There's no one you can put outside of that, because you are part of all. So by putting someone outside of that, you're putting part of yourself outside. That's why sometimes those prayers come back to bite us, because it's trying to tell us, wait a minute, you don't know what you're saying, you don't know what you're doing. And remember, God's always going to try to take you higher, no matter where you start from. And the way to pour more good into you is to open you up. And that's what prayer does. Now, some people say that prayer is talking to God and meditation is listening to God. But I think they're two sides of the same coin. A lot of times people use the phrase, the word contemplation, as a blend between the two. Contemplation meaning a concentrated time to think about something. And that's very valuable because we live in this mental world. But prayer has feeling. We are made to have feelings and emotions for a reason. That's part of our apparatus. That's part of the tools that we bring to this life form. The feelings in your body, the feelings that your thoughts engender, all of that is part of the feedback that consciousness requires. That's why we say we pay attention and set our intention. Both of those are necessary. Because if you're desiring to do something, you don't know if it's done until you get back that feedback. Feedback is part of the process. So in your living every day, your everyday life as a prayer, you are constantly getting feedback, both of what your prayer really is beneath our words and understanding, and of its effects in the world. Think about it. Isn't that a wonderful thing? God is always talking to you. God is always communicating with you. Always giving you a little nudge higher, a little bit more information, a little more tools. When we talk about praying for someone or something, when you start with unification, you realize that you are praying for yourself. When you start with unification, you realize that we truly are all one. And when you unify with all that God is, you find a little bit more about who you are. When you move from that place and look at what it is you are praying about, it changes. Because you've changed. You've grown a little bit. You've opened a little bit. You've activated that part of you that knows. And what you end up focusing on may be something worlds away from where you started. This is part of the process of our life. And this is how our everyday becomes a prayer. Because as we go through the day, all of this, everything, is meant for your greater good. It may seem mundane, like finding a penny on the ground, or seeing a beautiful bird, smelling a bad smell. Everything is part of it. And if you can stay awake, alert, and aware, you will realize that this is a continuous process, that everything is part of praying and having that prayer answered and being with that flow. And your way is made easier, plainer, and quite frankly, a whole lot more fun. Many times prayer seems like a duty or a task. I propose that that's because we've forgotten our unification. If we start with unifying with our concept of God, truly tuning in, we know that we don't have a complete understanding, but all levels of you have some understanding of God. And when we tune into that and truly realize the magnificence and that we are in and of that magnificence, you are forever changed. Which means you forever change our world. So each time you pray, a little one, God bless everything, may all beings be happy, I'm so grateful, or a long thing, walking meditation, all day focus, however you want to do it, you're changing the world. Yeah, that's a big responsibility, that's right, but God in you is able. Remember, the Father within, He doeth the work. Our job is to tune in, turn on, and stay awake. We're not dreaming. It seems too good to be true, but we're not dreaming. This is it. Don't miss it. Enjoy.